The shop smelled strongly of thyme that morning as Meg thumbed carefully through one of Aunt Martha's old notebooks. Yarrow staunches bleeding, chamomile soothes restless hearts, sage, antiseptic, clears the mind. The words were written in her aunt's neat script, with small pencil sketches of each plant in the margins. Meg ran her fingers over a delicate drawing of thyme, tiny leaves and twisting stems, and tried to imagine herself offering it confidently to a customer. But the doubt crept in again, whispering like a draft beneath the door. You couldn't heal Thomas. What makes you think you can heal anyone? She pushed the thought away and rose to fetch the jar of thyme from the shelf. The herb crumbled slightly in her fingers as she pinched off a sprig. The scent was sharp and comforting all at once, filling the air with a faintly green warmth. She remembered Martha's voice. Always crush the leaves gently before steeping. It releases the oils. She set the kettle on the iron stove and waited for it to boil. The apothecary felt almost alive in its quiet way, the creak of wooden floor, the faint rustle of dried rosemary hanging from the rafters, the steady tick of the clock on the mantel. For a moment, she felt almost peaceful. The bell above the shop door jingled suddenly, breaking the stillness. Meg turned, her heart giving a small, startled jump. Harriet Cooper stood there, her cheeks pink from the cold. "Morning, Miss Hale," she said brightly. "I just thought I'd stop by to thank you." Meg blinked. "Thank me?" "Yes, of course," Harriet said. "That tea you mixed worked like a charm. Little Matthew's sleeping soundly again and coughing far less. First good night's rest I've had in weeks." Relief washed over Meg so swiftly her knees felt weak. I'm glad to hear that," she managed. "You've a gift," Harriet said firmly. "I told the baker to come see you next week about his wife's headaches. Seems Bellewood's in good hands with you." Meg felt a flush in her cheeks. She wanted to protest. "I'm no healer. I'm only guessing. I'm terrified every time someone walks through that door." But the words stuck in her throat. So she smiled faintly instead. "Thank you, Mrs. Cooper. That means more than you know." After Harriet left, the shop felt brighter somehow. The fire in the small hearth burned a little warmer. The jars on the shelves seemed to glow faintly in the pale morning light. Meg sat down at the counter, notebook open before her. This time her pen didn't hesitate as she added her own note beneath Martha's entry on thyme. "Steep gently with licorice root for winter coughs, and believe, even if only a little, that it might help." She read the words twice, her heart thudding softly in her chest. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, as she lit the candle in the bay window, Meg whispered into the quiet, "I think I might be able to do this." And for the first time, she sort of believed it. The shop had settled into a quiet rhythm. Each morning, Meg opened the shutters and swept the wooden floors while the kettle whistled gently on the stove. The townspeople had begun trickling in with small requests: lavender sachets for sleep, peppermint oil for headaches, chamomile tea for fretful children. She still doubted herself each time someone crossed the threshold. But when Harriet Cooper returned to thank her again, "Your brews made Matthew as spry as a spring lamb," Meg felt a faint flicker of something she hadn't known in months. It wasn't confidence exactly, but it was a deeper, more rich hope. That afternoon, as a pale winter sun dipped low behind the hills, the bell above the door chimed. Meg looked up to see Eliza Merrick standing there, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "I thought I'd pay you a call," Eliza said warmly, brushing snowflakes from her shawl. "You've been here weeks now, and I've yet to sit properly with you." Meg smiled faintly. "I'd like that." They settled in the small sitting room behind the shop. Meg added another log to the fire while Eliza arranged her skirts in the chair nearest the hearth. The room smelled faintly of lavender and thyme from the bundles drying near the stove. I see you've taken to the shop, Eliza said, glancing at the row of freshly labeled jars on the counter. I've tried, Meg admitted, but some days I still feel like I'm pretending. Aunt Martha made it all seem so effortless. She'd been at it for 40 years, my dear, Eliza said gently. You've only just begun. Meg poured tea for them both, her hands trembling only slightly as she passed the cup to Eliza. I worry, she confessed, that I'm no healer at all. I couldn't save my own husband. What right do I have to offer help to anyone else? Eliza's eyes softened. My Meg, healing was never about saving people. Martha knew that. She couldn't cure every ailment that came through this door, but she tended to hearts as much as bodies. She sipped her tea and continued. Sometimes a warm mug in your hands or someone listening to your troubles, that's a remedy in and of itself. Meg stared into the fire, her throat tightening. Thomas was everything to me, my husband, my best friend. He believed I could do anything. But, her voice faltered, but I don't feel like that woman anymore. Eliza reached across the small table and placed her hand over Meg's. Grief changes us, Meg. It burns down the life we thought we'd built. But it also clears the ground for something new, something we couldn't have imagined before. Meg blinked hard against the tears rising in her eyes. What if I don't know how to begin again? You've already begun, Eliza said softly. Each time you open that door, each time you crush time leaves between your fingers or light a candle in the window, you're weaving yourself back into the world, thread by thread. For a long moment, the only sound was the fire crackling. Later, after Eliza had gone and the shop had grown quiet again, Meg sat in the little chair by the window and watched as snow fell in the square. She pressed her palm into the glass, feeling its chill seep into her skin. Maybe Eliza was right. Maybe this wasn't just a shop. Maybe it was a place for the lost and weary to gather their strength again, a place for her to gather hers. That night, as she lit the candle in the apothecary window, Meg whispered softly, I'm still here, Thomas, and somehow, I think I'm going to be all right. By summer, the shop had found its rhythm, and so had Meg. Each morning, she tied her apron at the waist, swept the apothecary floor, and opened the shutters to let in the warm air. The scent of rosemary and lemon balm wafted through the little rooms as sunlight spilled across the shelves. The garden behind the shop had come alive under her care. When she first arrived in Bellewood, the herb beds were tangled with weeds, the soil dry and hard-packed from neglect. But she had turned the earth with her own hands, learning as she went. Now rows of thyme and sage lined the paths. Lavender swayed gently in the breeze, its purple blossoms buzzing with bees. Mint crept toward the stone walkway in a cheerful sprawl, and a slender rosemary bush stood sentinel near the back door. Meg knelt in the dirt, tucking a stray strand of chestnut hair behind her ear as she pressed seedlings gently into the soil. Her fingers were stained with earth. Her palms fainted scently of basil and chamomile. Once, her hands had trembled every time she tried to work. Now, they moved with quiet purpose. Bellewood's people had grown used to her presence in the apothecary. There was Mrs. Renshaw, who stopped by every week for peppermint oil and stayed to chat about her grandchildren. And Tom Fletcher, the carpenter with a laugh like rolling thunder, who bought comfrey salve for his knees and always brought a fresh loaf of bread from his wife. Even Miss Lydia Pine, the sharp-tongued spinster, had warmed to Meg over time. Your hands are steadier than I expected, Lydia said one afternoon, inspecting her packet of sage. Martha would be proud, I suppose. It wasn't exactly praise, but Meg felt oddly touched. In the evenings, she sometimes took her tea outside and sat among the herbs, watching the glow of fireflies in the hedgerow. She still thought of Thomas every day, but the memory no longer felt like a blade twisting in her chest. Now it was softer, like a gentle ache, edged with gratitude for what they had shared. One Sunday afternoon, the square was alive with voices as neighbors set up tables for the midsummer gathering. Meg helped Eliza Merrick arrange small bouquets of rosemary and wildflowers for the tables. "You've made yourself at home here," Eliza said warmly, handing Meg a sprig of thyme. Meg smiled faintly. "I suppose I have." And for the first time, she realized it was true. That evening, Meg lit the candle in the apothecary's window, as she always did. But tonight, as the flame flickered to life, she whispered not to Thomas, nor to Martha, but to herself, "I'm still here, and I think I'm finally growing." By mid-July, Bellewood seemed to hum with quiet joy. The roses in the square burst into bloom, spilling pink and cream petals onto the cobblestones. Bees drifted lazily through the air, and every window in the village seemed to glow a little brighter, as if Bellewood itself knew how to lean into warmth. Meg found her days full of gentle, steady tasks. In the morning, she watered the herb garden behind the shop, her hair brushing over the lavender stems, releasing their perfume into the sun-warmed air. By noon, the apothecary would fill with neighbors needing rosemary sprigs for roasts, peppermint oil for headaches, or calendula salve for sunburns. And in the evenings, she sometimes took her tea to the garden wall and watched the fireflies rise like sparks against the twilight sky. It surprised her how much she loved Bellewood. She hadn't expected to stay this long. She hadn't expected to feel anything, really. But here, in this little village, something in her heart had begun to loosen. When the invitation to the summer picnic arrived, a folded card with "Come celebrate the sea breeze and sun," Meg hesitated at first. It felt strange to imagine herself at such a gathering. But Eliza Merrick appeared in the shop that morning with a basket of early peaches and a look that brooked no argument. "You're coming, my dear," she said firmly. "It's Bellewood's way of reminding us that life is to be shared." The day of the beach picnic dawned warm and clear. Meg dressed simply in a pale linen gown and tied her chestnut hair back with a ribbon. She carried a small basket of rosemary biscuits she had baked that morning, a recipe Martha had written in the margins of her herb ledger. The path to the sea was dappled in sunlight, and the air smelled faintly of salt and wild roses. As Meg crested the final hill, the view took her breath away. The ocean stretched wide and blue beneath the sky, its waves rolling in a gentle hush. Bellewood's townfolk had gathered on the grassy cliffs above the shore, their tables laden with strawberries, fresh bread, and jars of golden honey. Children ran barefoot through the meadow, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Meg found herself seated beside Clara Branson, who offered her a warm smile. "I've heard wonderful things about yourselves," Clara said softly. "And I've heard of your weaving," Meg replied. Clara's eyes crinkled. "It's Bellewood," she said with a faint laugh. "This place has a way of drawing out gifts we didn't know we carried." Later, as the afternoon waned, Meg walked down to the shore with Clara and Eliza. The sea breeze lifted her hair, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. Waves kissed the sand in slow, deliberate strokes, leaving behind shimmering ribbons of foam. "It's strange," Meg murmured. "I spent so long feeling like I'd been emptied out. And now I feel as though the world is pouring itself back into me, bit by bit." Clara slipped her arm through Meg's. "That's Bellewood for you. It mends what we can't." That evening, as the lanterns were lit along the path back to the village, Meg felt a quiet fullness in her chest. She still carried Thomas in her heart. She always would. But for the first time in a long while, her heart felt wide enough to hold more than grief.